Right, sorry, my last video I had some issue with writing things on the notes, so I'm going to continue where we left off. So I eliminated 96 and 101, continuing 96 and then 101. And then now you have a 96 and 97 left, so the middle value will be basically average between the two. So we are expecting P sub 50 to be 96.5. Okay, and then we'll check P sub 73 using the formula. So here was my prediction. Let's double check and see if our prediction is correct. Okay, part A. We have a find the percentile for an IQ score with 96. So let's go back to the previous page that's asking percentile. So I use the first formula. Let's copy down the formula. So we have a percentile of 96. 7 plus 0.5 times 3 equal all over 20. Again, I got this formula from the previous page right here. This is the formula that I'm using. Times 100 because it's asking for percentage value. So you pull that, you put those numbers in the calculator. I get 42.5, which is 43% rounding to the whole number. Well, that was our prediction between 40 to 50%. So 96 right here, so that means it's in the 43 percentage value. So anything below 96 represent the 43%. Anything above 96, so it will be 97 and on, right? From here and on, that separates the 57%, highest 57% of IQ score. So that's how you interpret it. So let me write a sentence. IQ score of 96 is in the 43th percentile. That means IQ score of 96 separates the lowest 43% of IQ score from the highest 57% of IQ score. Okay, so that's good. Our prediction was correct. Now let's take a look at part B, which we predicted the answer to be between 87 to 88. Part B, find the value of 18th percentile, which is P sub 18. Notice that here, this time we are finding the value, not the percentage value. So I'm looking at the actual data value. I want to find the actual data value. So this is involving this one here, data value, finding the data value. So I'll be using the I formula. So I is equal to K over 100 times n plus 1. K is the percentile in question. So this is 18 over 100. N is a sample size. There's a 20 data plus 1. So I got 3.78. Well, 3.78 is not a whole number. So what happens if it's not a whole number? Is it a whole number? No. Round I up and down to the nearest integer. Average the two data value between these two positions. So round up and down. So that's third plus fourth divided by 2. So you go back to the list, look at the third and then fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one, 87, 88. 87 plus 88 divided by 2. So I get 87.5, which was our prediction. So that's good. Between 87 to 88. Okay, so that's the difference between A and B. Now C is a repeated of part B, but instead of 18, I just changed to 25, 50, 75, or I could have asked Q1, Q2, Q3. So let's also do part C, more practice on converting to the data value. I ran out of space, so I'm gonna erase the work for A and B. Let me also erase this one here. Okay, part C. So P sub 25. We first need to calculate the I. 25 over 100 times 20 plus 1, which is 5.25. Again, that's not a whole number, so I'm gonna take 5th and the 6th data value and then average that out. 5th data, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These two, 89 plus 93 divided by 2, which is 91. IQ score of 91 is in the 25th percentile. That's what it means. That means IQ score of 91 separates the lowest 25 from the highest 75%. Let's also find out P sub 50, which is the middle value. We already know that by counting by hand, by crossing out the term. It was a 96.5 because that represents the right in the middle position. But let's also use the formula to see if we do get 96.5. So again, I is equal to 50 divided by 100 times 20 plus 1. Doing the calculation, I got 10.5. Again, not a whole number, so round down 10th position plus 11th position divided by 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10th, 11, 96. Oops. 96 plus 97 divided by 2, which equals to 96.5. That's good. Let's do one more. P sub 75. Again, you can kind of see that 75, if 50% represent this, 75 should be towards here, middle value somewhere here. Let's check. I is equal to 75 divided by 100. 20 plus 1. I'm getting 15.75. So that means 15th plus 16th divided by 2, 15. So 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15, 6, right there. 103 plus 113 divided by 2. I'm getting 108. Okay, so those are my Q1, Q2, Q3. Part D, any outlier in the table 3.1 data. Let's go back to the previous page and then look at the IQR because that will help us determine the potential outlier. Now, IQR is a Q3 minus Q1, and then to check to see if value is an outlier, we have to use this formula Q1 plus 1.5 IQR, Q3 plus 1.5 IQR, and then to see if the data are below Q1 minus 1.5 IQR. We also call this 1.5 IQR criterion. 1.5 IQR criterion help us determine if there's a potential outlier. So let's first calculate the IQR. IQR is Q3 minus Q1, also known as P sub 75 minus P sub 25. And that's what we did over here in part C. P sub 75 was 108 minus Q1, P sub 25. I'm sorry, P sub 75 was 108, Q sub 25 was a 91. So I'm getting 17 for the inner quartile range. Now, let's look at Q3 plus 1.5 IQR value, and then Q1 minus 1.5 IQR value. Q3, which is a 108 plus 1.5 times 17. I'm getting 133.5. 91 minus 1.5, 17, 65.5. So I'm looking at this. There's a 65.5 and then 133.5. Anything above 133.5, anything below 65.5, that's an outlier. But looking at it, we have an 85. And then the highest is 127. 85 is not below 65.5. 127 is not above 133.5. So therefore, there is no outlier. Okay. All right, let's move on to the last section, 2.4, box plot. Box plot is actually another way of organizing the data. Now, why do we not learn box plot when we were learning like stem plot and then the bar graph and so on? The box plot, the reason why we didn't include it with the earlier in chapter 2 is because box plot requires these information. Q1, Q2, Q3, and we haven't talked about the quartiles at the beginning of chapter 2. But now we are ready to talk about box plot. Now, box plot has these 5 data value. It gives you the 5 data value. We call it 5 number summary, and it's in the order of a minimum data value, quartile Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q5. So you're basically knowing those major data values. Okay, so the box plot, also known as box and whisker diagram, is a graph of a data set that consists of a line extending from minimum value to the maximum value, and a box with a line drawn at the first quartile, the median, and the third quartiles. Okay, so let's use IQ score that we've been using in table 3.1 and create a box plot. We already know all this number. Minimum value 85. We got Q1 already from part C as Q1 91, 96.5, 108, and the maximum value 127. This is pretty easy. It says consists of line extending from min to max value. So here 80, 85, 90, 95, 100, 105, 110, 115, 120, 125, 130. So locate the minimum 85, 127 maximum, and then make a line going through the min to max. And then box with the lines drawn at the Q1, Q2, and Q3. So let's also locate Q1, which is 91. Q2, which is 96.5. And then Q3, 108. And then make a box. That's it. Now, you're not going to see these label min Q1, Q2, Q3 max. If you're looking at a box plot, you are expected, they expect you to know the first one represent the minimum, and then Q1 value, Q2, Q3, and the max value. Now, what's nice about looking at this graph, right? I mean, we saw the different graph. Here the same IQ one with the bar graph tells you the frequency, how many counts, also stem plot, right? Now what does box plot tells you? Well, box plot tells you kind of like the house, the data that are spread out. You can see that this represents the 50% data. And then here's another 50% of data, right? Just gonna use difficult. So if this represents 50 and this represent another 50, you can see that the data are kind of close on the bottom 50, and then data are more spread out for the upper 50, right? Because longer distance, okay? So more spread out the range, and then less spread out. And you can see that from the actual data set here, 85 to 96. The range is 96 take away 85. The distance is 11. Now 127 take away 97. That's a distance of 30. So the data are more spread out, the data are less spread out. We're going to talk about the spread of the data in part 2 of chapter 2. So at that point, I'm going to talk about a little bit more. Now, that's pretty much it. But now I'm going to show you a better way to calculate these Q1, Q2, Q3 with your graphing calculator. So we did it by one's hand. Now you can use a calculator to calculate these. So I'm going to open up this app. This is like the 84 app, okay? If you have an actual 84 calculator, you can use that too. You're gonna just press the same button, okay? So first, we need to enter the data, right? So this is really nice. Now, if you use a calculator, it's gonna take really quick to calculate these. Your calculator do not have an IQ set, so we need to first enter the data. So if you look at this one, there's a stat key. You're gonna press stat key and then go to edit button. And then you're going to start putting the numbers here. Now I start already, so I'll clear this one. Okay, so should be empty for yours. So I'm going to enter this data. So table 3.1, let's enter the data. It was 85, 87, 87, 88, 89, 93, 94, 96, 96, 96, 97, 101, 101, 103, 103, 113, 114, 124, 126, and 127. So now you enter the data. Now your calculator has all the data, so you are ready to calculate these Q1, Q2, Q3. So next one is you're going to be using the function called one bar statistic, and that will give you all those 5 number summary. So stat, now middle column to the calc, and then you see one bar statistic. Enter that, enter. And then you see there's a bunch of information given on your calculator, right? So X bar 101, the sum of X, these are all the symbols that we will be using in part B of part 2 of chapter 2. But the first one is a symbol for the average. So if you add up all those 20 data divided by 20, you're gonna get 101. Now the sigma x is the sum of x. So if you add all those data value, the 20, you're gonna end up having total 20. Don't worry about the next two symbol. I'll talk about this a little bit later when you go to chapter 2, part 2. Now the one that we're interested is these one over here, the last few column. And 20, that makes sense, 20 data. Now you see the mean x, 85, Q1, 91, median 96.5, Q3, 108, maximum 127. That last 5 column is exactly what you see on the 5 number summary, 85, 91, 96.5, 108, 127. We got this without a calculator first by going through the formula right here. But now you can use a formula to calculate this. However, you still have to know the formula because the one bar statistic doesn't tell you, for example, P sub 18. Okay? So if I ask you to calculate P sub 18 on the test, you cannot use one bar statistic because it only tells you Q1, Q2, and Q3. So make sure you still know how to use a formula to calculate the value of a percentile. But for creating the box plot, you can just use a calculator to do it. Okay. Also, one thing, you can actually see the graph of create the box plot. Here's 5 number summary. What if you want to create a box plot? Then you're going to be pressing the second key, y equal to, and there's a bunch of setting, right? So you wanna have a stat plot on. It's off. Should be on. L1. This is my first time using this app. I normally use a physical calculator, so I might have to figure this out a little bit, but let's try this one. Here on the setting, you're gonna hit this one. You see that there's a bunch of them. Oops. You see there's a dot here and then line, bar graph. We're interested in a box plot. So let's try that and then graph. You don't see that. I think it has to do with this on and off button. L1 graph. Oh, right there. You see this box plot right there, really tiny bit. Let me change the window to 0 and then maximum 150, -10 to +10 graph. There you go. So I just adjust the window a little bit better because initially the calculator had huge numbers. We do not need it because technically our data begins 80 to 130. So I adjust the X value. If you want to, you can adjust even more to, let's do 80 to 130, just like we did it in the lecture notes. And you can even adjust this one to -5 to 5. to even make it more zoom in. Graph. There you go. You can see the box plot that we created kind of matches up with our notes right there. Okay. So you can use a graphing calculator to also do that. Now lastly, I'm just gonna write down the steps for you in case you didn't catch that when you go through the video. So how do you construct a box plot using a calculator? So using TI-8384 for box plot. Here, enter data, stat, edit, L1. Second one, after you enter the data, we went to the 5-number summary, right? Calculate 5-number summary. We press the stat key and then calc 1 var stats. And number 3, creating a box plot. This was the one that I kind of struggle with the app because I'm not familiar with the app setting, but you can use the same thing on the physical calculator. We press the second key and then y equal to go to the stem plot. And then we had a stat plot on. We chose the box plot picture, right? Because we want to construct it. And then lastly, I adjust the window size so that you can see the graph more better. So that's pretty much it for section 2.1 to 2.4. On the next video, I will continue lecturing chapter 2.